high church Protestants need to calm down. I've been seeing a lot of people online that will say about how the non-denominationals, evangelicals, whatever you want to call them, the Baptists, your average Southern Baptist, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm from the South. Hard to believe, right? But that they don't actually have proper worship. They don't have communion every Sunday, or maybe sometimes even once a month. A lot of them do it, I don't know, once every quarter, maybe once a year. I don't know for sure. I remember whenever I grew up, I didn't hardly ever do that. They don't take communion very seriously, even when they do it. They always have the strip, Billy Bob's strip mall, Church of God, Free Will Baptist. And there are some unserious churches, unserious non-denominationals, your mega churches, your prosperity gospel churches, so on and so forth. But you also do have a lot of serious Bible-believing Southern Baptist and non-denominational churches. And I think, the mainline Protestants are letting it get to their head. They're letting it get to their head that they, have better worship, and somehow their church is just superior. And I don't think that's necessarily the case, because I have a lot of people in my life that are pretty much everybody I know personally is a Southern Baptist, and they are some of the kindest, nicest people with the Holy Spirit that you'll ever know. It's got nothing to do with how high church your specific church is. And I think we need to remember that, because it's not just about what you do, it's about why you do it. And the Southern Baptists, especially, out of all the more evangelicals, some of the Pentecostals too, they do get it. A lot of them do get it. They don't do everything for the right reason, but they don't do everything that they should do, but they do a lot of stuff, and I think we need to stop forgetting that. I like to bring up, well, I don't know if I should bring that up. That's probably outside of the scope of what this talk is about. But, basically, the circumstances that you're in don't prescribe how good you are. Obviously that's not the case, because otherwise rich people would be better and poor people would be worse people. And that's obviously not the case. So we need to stop lording it over non-denominationals and Baptists and so on and so forth, that, Presbyterians or Lutherans or Anglicans or, let alone that, the Catholics and Eastern Orthodox somehow have, superior personalities or superior beliefs. Well, okay, the beliefs part is kind of true, but I think the point has gotten across. But I think it especially applies to the Catholic and Eastern Orthodox. It's just that they have teachings and dogma that tell them that essentially they're superior, so I understand why they believe it. But I think we need to take their example and use that as to why we are still not superior to the Southern Baptists. So I like to bring up that the Baptists do actually have, the Baptist Pentecostals, I'll just call them evangelicals. They do have the Holy Spirit. They don't have the most solid teaching. No, they don't. They don't have the most solid services. No. But they do understand biblical principles very well. They're very much a feel it, not so much a think it kind of thing. Maybe kind of the way I'm explaining this right now. But they couldn't explain to you so much why any detail of theology is the way it is. A lot of them. Some of them can. maybe not to the detail that like a Presbyterian would like, but some of them can, but most of them couldn't explain to you, the exact function of how they're saved and in what order, and I forget all the terminology of soteriology, what is it, salvation, justification, so on and so forth. They couldn't tell you any of that. I mean, I couldn't either, to be honest, but that's because I just haven't studied it enough. I am a convert from baptism, Baptist. So I'm still trying to catch up, but anyways, they couldn't tell you all that, but you can tell that they are saved. They essentially have the basics down, and they can argue that very well. That's how they're so good at evangelism, because they're not so worried about the details. They would rather just start doing. They want to preach the word, and I think that's very important, whereas we're getting hung up on all the little details. And sometimes, a lot of time, that's okay. I think it's actually a good thing to have a very solid theology. But anyways, I've gotten off the rails a little bit from where I was going with this. Whoops, there goes the camera. I'm kind of driving right now with holding the phone with one hand. But so, one thing I like to point out is that the Catholics and Eastern Orthodox, they would say that we are heretical. We are going to hell. They have to say that according to their own doctrine. But we don't believe that, obviously. And so we don't believe that of ourselves. We don't believe that of non-denominationals, right? And so you have to consider the reason why we don't believe that. And it's because we don't believe that the exact Catholic or Orthodox Church that was quote-unquote handed down is the only, it is one of the key factors to salvation. Now, some people do believe that they have apostolic succession, although the Anglicans, I think they may have lost that now, unfortunately. Rest in peace, the See of Canterbury. But, it's whatever. That was never the most important detail anyways, I don't think. And so, in that same vein, because, not all of us have that technically correct apostolic succession, so do the Baptists. So we're in the same boat there. Yeah. And I think it's pretty obviously a shame that the Catholics and the Eastern Orthodox believe that none of us are Christians at all. Because it's obvious. You can see. There are plenty of stories of Catholic and Orthodox converts from Protestant denominations, usually the evangelical ones. And you can tell from a lot of their stories that their parents have the Spirit with them. They are obviously saved Christians. And then their kids will convert to one of the ecclesial denominations, I guess. I don't remember how you describe them. And then now they're forced to say that, oh, well, my parents who brought me to the light in the first place are not actually saved at all. They're not going to be going to heaven. Sorry. And I just find that to be obviously false. And in that same vein, we have to view our evangelical brothers in a similar sort of light, that obviously a lot of them are going to be saved. Maybe they don't have, the 100% fullness of the faith. Maybe they've got like 95%, whereas like the Catholics have like, the 80%, whatever you want to call it. But they still have it in a large majority. There's a reason why the Baptists and evangelicals exploded in popularity around like the 60s, because in the history of the U.S., it has been majority Presbyterian, Episcopal, I think some Anglican, and Lutheran. And then I think there's a couple others here and there, maybe Congregationalists, so on and so forth. But it was really those like 3 or 4 mainly. And then, rather, I should include Methodist in that, replace Anglican with Methodist. And that's what the U.S. used to be mainly. And then it's only been in the past, roughly 60 or so years that the Baptists and the rest of them, the Pentecostals now, even later on, have been able to explode in popularity. And I don't think it's because it's just completely a fad. You can't write it off. That's just not the case. You know, it is a fad, but it's not completely a fad. There's more to it than that. So, anyways, after ranting for so long, hopefully there's been something coherent in all this. But yeah, goodbye.